Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. For those of you that I haven't met, I'm Terry Stallo, and I am proud to serve as the superintendent of Prior Lake Savage Area Schools. As we come together tonight, I have a lot of gratitude for you being here. You know, the goal of opening up a community engagement process is that people will actually show up. So I want to thank you for that. And I want to thank you as I look in this audience and see many of you who have showed up again and again and again. And I think that speaks to your desire to learn as much as you can about this process, as well as the importance of the input that we're really seeking tonight. So thank you for being here. Before we get started, I would like to invite our school board chair, Rich Wolf, to just greet you and anything else he wants to say.
Well, thank you for coming out, first of all, tonight. I know as I was driving here, I enjoy bicycling, and I saw a couple bicycles out. I'm going, oh. But thank you again for coming out here on such a beautiful evening and sharing your thoughts and ideas with us. And we have several other board members with us here tonight. They're sitting in the back. Stacy Ruel, if you could wave your hand maybe. And Lee Shimmick, there she is, and Ben Hansen. Okay, we're here today just to listen. So we want to hear your thoughts and ideas, and thank you again for coming.
Great, thank you very much. This is the second time that we've done a community input session. So those of you who were here the first time, you're going to see kind of a similar process. Those of you who weren't here, we are so happy that you are here. You can see the slide, and some of you have seen this slide numerous times, and it's really intentional that I am starting with that this evening. As we launch the school year this year with our staff, with all of our staff in August, we use this as the theme, and we have really used this throughout the year to say, you know, as we work, all of us, to create the vision that we have of the school district and the mission of our school district, which is to educate all learners to reach their full potential as contributing and productive members of our ever-changing global community, we know that no one can do that alone. And as we think about we are PLSAS, Prior Lake Savage Area Schools, we think about that as a full staff whose job it is to educate 8,307-ish students. We think about all of our administrative staff and school board and parents and community members. So to me, this is really a celebration that throughout this process, so many of you have been engaged. And we're very happy that you're here. Just to get a little bit of a lay of the land, how many of you feel like you've been kind of a part of this process and you kind of know what's going on in terms of enrollment and where we are with projections? Seeing some hands? Awesome. How many of you don't have children in the schools right now? Okay, excellent, thank you. How many of you, this is kind of the first time or one of the first times that you're just hearing and you want to be a part of this and you want to provide input? Excellent. Excellent. Well, for all of you, thank you for being here because really it does take all of us. We know that the best plan moving forward is one that meets the needs of our facilities and our enrollment, as well as something that can be ultimately, should the board decide to go back out, or when the board decides to go back out for a referendum, is also supported by the community. And that's why we're here tonight, is to figure that out. Thank you. So as I said tonight, those of you who were here, whoa, that's getting way ahead. I know we want this to go quickly, but that's a little too quickly. Sorry about that, everyone. All right. As I said, those of you who were here before, we're going to use a similar process. Our goal tonight is to seek your input. However, we feel it's very important that before we do that, we have a chance to set some context, to talk about the process we've used, to share some of the data that we've reviewed, and then ultimately to show you what are those conceptual drafts that are options that we want input on, that then the facilities task force and design team will continue to take this input and continue to make revisions toward the plan. So We're going to talk a little bit. I've got a couple other members of my team. Our Director of Communications, Christy Mustman, will be sharing some information, as will Assistant Superintendent Jeff Holmberg. We have a lot of members of our administrative staff here tonight. We also have several members of the Facilities Task Force here tonight. They're going to help with some note-taking throughout the process. This is where we always start, is really grounding ourselves in this community-based and community-created strategic plan. I've already cited our mission, so I will spare you doing that again. But I do want you to know that this document has grounded the process. You know, as we think about the work that we're doing, looking at facilities that will take us into the future, we have to maintain an eye ultimately on that prize of student achievement, student learning, and also the other values and visions and strategies that we have to help achieve that mission for all students. As an E-STEM district, as a innovative school district, as a high-performing school district, we want to be sure that we are maintaining that level of excellence that all of you in our community, I know, have come to expect. And we want to be sure that we have the facilities that we're able to ensure that that continues. This just lays out the process that we've been involved in since this fall. We have gathered a 50-member community facilities task force that have come together multiple times. They are providing input and insight and statements of consultation to a design team of administrators and experts. That flow has been going back and forth. In the middle of it, we had an earlier community input session. We also had a board listening session where we were able to, and a survey, community survey, where we were able to get additional input from community members. Since then, the Facilities Task Force has analyzed that data and has provided additional insights to our design team, who took a look at that and have made some changes. So you can see where we are tonight at a community input session to hear your input. I want to be clear that we are not done with this process. Everything that you see is in draft form, and the purpose of tonight is to listen and to move us closer to a plan and recommendations that will go to our school board. The school board did start the process when they approved a process, a robust process of community engagement. The parameters also had to be set by the school board. So they came together to create this kind of one-page guiding change document, which lays out the why. What's the problem that we're trying to solve? The problem that we're trying to solve, I don't want to say the problem, the issue we're trying to solve is our projections, our current student enrollment is outpacing our projections. Many of our schools are at or beyond capacity, and we see through our demographic study that that enrollment will continue into our future, and we are running out of space. Included in that, as I said earlier with our strategic plan, is our focus on curricular needs, on core needs, on co-curricular needs. So you'll see that that's part of that why in terms of what we're solving for as well. The result then, what we're looking for is some viable options as recommendations to bring to the board for consideration. I do want to share one thing of this guiding change document that was changed. When we started the process, we were looking at, through this guiding change process, asking the Facilities Task Force to seek a 5-year solution. And the Facilities Task Force members pushed back on that and requested that we look at a longer-term solution. So the numbers that you'll see and the projections that you'll see tonight are a 10-year. And the concepts that we're bringing before you in draft form are also a 10-year solution. So that's been a change, and this is a dynamic process. So that's been a change from the beginning. So with that very brief overview, I'm going to hand this over to Christy, and then Jeff will take it from there. Sorry.
Hello, I'm Christy Mustman. I'm the Director of Communications, and chances are you've seen a few emails from me over the years from the district. That's me. Now you have a face with a name. And I know several of you don't have hard copies of this presentation. They're printing as we speak, so I'll get those out to you in just a couple slides here. Just to briefly go over what our facilities planning process was and has been, we decided earlier this fall that we were really going to go through a detailed, robust public engagement process, and you're in the midst of it right now. What we did is we started by forming a task force, and they are stakeholder voice. They are a 50-member team, as Terry mentioned. They are here. A lot of them are here tonight. They provided input to a design team, and this design team is made up of administrators in the district, as well as contractors and engineers, architects, that actually put together the options that you're going to see based on the input. Ultimately, the choice makers, the decision makers, are the school board, several of whom are here tonight, and they will be seeing final options brought to them for their consideration end of April, and then decision likely in May. So we're in the midst of this process now. We've had one input session already. The school board held a listening session, and this input has been filtered in with that task force team so that we're getting even more input from our community to move these options forward, each time refining the options a little bit more and a little bit more. One thing that we really wanted to make sure that task force had in their hands is a data book. And this is just kind of a snapshot of the categories that are in this data book. It's a huge 3-ring binder. All of this information is on the website as well for anyone to look at. And the purpose of it was not to overwhelm them with information, but to give them the same information that we as administrators and the school board members see when making big decisions like this. So we wanted them to have all that information so they can plainly see that there's a lot going on with it. And they did a great job going through all of it. It was overwhelming. They spent hours looking at it on their own and reviewing it as a group. So, and that's on our website for anyone who loves data. It's out there. I'm going to go get those copies for you now.
Thanks, Christy. Hi, everyone. I'm Jeff Holmberg. I'm the assistant superintendent. I'm going to be taking you through some enrollment information, and then we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of the actual options and where we're at with some of the feedback from the first meeting through the process. As you look at really where this slide really stands to show the trajectory of the district, and looking at where some recent bonds have passed as well as operating levies, and as far as when some of the construction has taken place in the district. And what you see here is a steady increase of student enrollment all the way through, even including and during the years of the recession. We were a district that continued to grow. This, and I think I caught part of Dr. Stallo's opening remarks, this is what we're looking to solve for. Looking at a 10-year, again, projection of, we're anticipating 2,165 students coming into the district. And as you look at that, as you break out over the different grade levels, we've also have this broken out by elementary, middle school, high school, and our Bridges ALC program. And we also put in, at the request of our facilities task force, the early childhood preschool numbers in here as well. And so as we think of that 10 years, and I know some of you, I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces, and I've prefaced the 10 years. That is, as we start getting into the options, please keep that in mind, that the 10 years and what you're going to be seeing are those 10-year solutions matched with meeting the needs of the 2,165 students that we are anticipating coming into the district. So the task force, as they went through their process and the data book did, come to agreement on some consultations. They were, as the design team was putting together some of these options. Many of these consultation pieces were on enrollment design for 5 years out, as well as 10 years out. And then also looking at really understanding some of the Department of Education's requirements for square footage with the distinction between elementary, middle school, and high school. So this is some different information. And I believe at our last input session, we had a couple people ask, what are the MDE requirements for building schools for our students? And so we have this up here as well. Looking at teaching capacity at the elementary level, our students are in a homeroom setting, and so that classroom is used 100% of the time. Same thing at the secondary level. having a utilization schedule of 85% still equals 100% of the building being used, because we do have teachers switching around, moving from classroom to classroom, and so having a fully packed building puts teachers on carts at a secondary level. We currently have district classroom size targets. Elementary average class size is 23, middle school at 28, high school at 32, and then recognizing the context of long-term facility needs and short-term. As we look to long-term and the number of students we're anticipating coming into the district, increasing those class sizes, the facilities task force did not feel was a viable option to address our space needs, particularly for the long term. And then as we look to new buildings, new schools, recognizing that our indications are we're a part of the community that's going to continue to grow for some time, ensure that we have some space that we can add additions in the future. So these were the consultations that the task force endorsed and really brought into their work around these options. I guess a couple more. Consolidate boundary changes, particularly for our elementary students, if at all possible, to align that with a new building opening. Boundary changes do have an impact on families, and our task force is very sensitive to that. And then also, too, ensure that we have opportunities for communication of the plan, of the process, and that's why we're here this evening. So, and then the added, this was another consultation, is take every opportunity to provide the greatest value for the community's investment while ensuring that current and future classroom and core space needs are met based on a 10-year enrollment projection. And I think, if I could sum that, I think really people want a great experience for their kids at a good value. And that's what that means. And I think being mindful of what the 10 years looks like. So there are some common elements for design concepts, and I believe all of you are going to be getting those handouts. So when we look at all schools, these are some of those core design elements. I'm not going to read those off to you, but you will have an opportunity to look through them when you're in your small group. We also have some design elements for pre-K and early education programs, for elementary schools and middle schools, and then also for high schools. And these are things that through the process, making sure when we're looking at the options, that there's some context around how the options were developed. Just a water. So one of the things that we're going to start with, based on the feedback, is we did have one option that came forward called the comprehensive campus option. That option has been removed. And so as we've looked through as we've received feedback, as we've put that out there to receive feedback, this was an option that has been taken off the table by the task force. And the rationale and the input we've received from the community thus far is, number one, too costly. It was our most costly option. There was a longer wait in order to fix or address some of our enrollment issues. And some of the other concerns and rationale from the community was a large high school and large middle school campus. So there's not going to be a breakout session tonight around this option, just to be clear. So the options we are going to be talking about are these. And one of the things about doing multiple feedback or stakeholder things is we always get good questions. And in the past, I don't think we've been as clear about what this is. And when we look at our enrollment for 10 years, and we look at the number of students that we need facilities for, we need an option at the elementary level, which is one of these two, and we need options at the secondary level. So It's almost like one is selected here and one is selected here to meet the needs of elementary and secondary kids. Yes, sir. Hmm. We have not. Quite honestly, it's very difficult to look beyond 5. We did have a demographer provide a study to the district. One of the challenges with looking beyond 5 is people aren't born yet. And so by nature of any demographer or any study that looks at long-term enrollment is going to automatically start to become more conservative. So looking at 10 to 20 years is be a great concept to look that far out. Certainly there's been some studies by Met Council and some other ones that project out to 2040. But as we look at the school district and look at enrollment, it becomes pretty difficult, much more difficult than beyond that after that 10-year point. So, and that reminds me, if I could, before your second question, on that enrollment slide, when you get to years 8, 9, and 10, you do see enrollment drop. And that's not as a result of the district projecting that. It's just by the nature of it is a recognition that things become very conservative, and we're accounting for kids that are not born yet after 5. So as you look at that that same slide with the enrollment, that slide recognizes that open enrollment is limited next year and then open after that. So what we are factoring in for the facilities are resident students and open enrollment students after the years 2018, 19, and beyond. Sure. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Mm. It's a great question. Our projections in the past, and I've been with the district 8 years, and I've been through, I think in each of those years we've had a growth task force, demographic study group based on projections. Our projections have always been conservative. So when we've had demographic reports in the past, we've had a high line, a high trajectory, middle, and low. And even in most of at least the history that I've been here, it has surpassed, and our enrollment has, and our projections have been conservative. So, and again, some of that goes towards, as I referenced before, during the recession years, we were one of the few areas of the community that continued to grow. And so we and again, that one slide shows that in there. But yeah, and so people are moving here, and as we think about the demographer's report over the next 5 years, we're looking at 250 resident students per year. That is our projection right now for the next 5 years based on that demographer study. It could, or if we're looking at if the economy continues to be strong, we might have more residents move into this community too. So, yeah. One of the things that I can recall is, and again, I wasn't here at that time. The way my recollection is, and I know we've had board members and administrators here a little bit longer than I've been. I understand that the first referendum for the high school was failed, and as a result of that, the project was minimized and scaled down. And so, as a result of that, the referendum that was passed for that high school was a smaller building. And so, in terms of capturing the enrollment, there was less space in order to do that, which meant that as we projected out, it actually accelerated based on the less space that was added to it. Yeah. Right. No, the school was scaled back from what I understand, because it was less a wing and a few other things. So it did. I don't. As far as the design, I don't know. Yeah, that's that. I don't know. I usually don't trust the headlines in the paper, but I understand too. Come on, Hannah. Come on, come on, come on. Yes. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's all kidding aside, and again, my apologies. I think that goes to why we've continued to pay attention to this work, and why we've continued to pay attention, and why the task force has been looking at the growth of our district and our community. The information that's out in the data book and the slides that are here tonight, there are very few communities that are going to show a growth trajectory like the one Prior Lake Savage has been on. And when you're looking at demographics, and you're looking at student enrollment, and you're looking at trying to balance that, I wish we had a crystal ball and we could see things clearly. But that's the intention of coming together, having this community process where we're looking at the best information that we have at the time, and having a very thoughtful school board that's weighing all of those different issues, and again, taking feedback and making the best decision for the students that they have with the information that they have. So, I can't speak to comments that were made back in 2003, but I can tell you that the situation we have now is, as Dr. Stallo said, many of our sites are at capacity, and we are poised to continue to grow by every indicator that we've looked at. And so that's the reason for the need, and looking at the 2,165 students. So I'm going to keep going here. I do want to say one thing just to sort of get a sense. There is a little bit of a third option here for elementary based on implementation timeline, which I'll be talking about. This one here in the middle is a new option that came through the input process. And what this one is a current schools with additions. This one is the two high schools with additions. This one here is about a $5.5 million reduction in co-curricular space. So when we're looking at this option and this option here takes out a gymnasium, takes out space for robotics, takes out space for fine arts, and does not have any additions to our 2 auditoriums, the one at Prior Lake High School and the one at Twin Oaks Middle School. As a result, and that was some feedback that came through the process of, can you trim this down a little bit and look at it from a curricular focus, or more of a curricular focus. And so certainly task force looked at that, design team looked at that, and there's more detail in the information you have tonight that provides that overview. Okay. I'm going to go through these very quickly. The first one is the centralized elementary 4-year-old pre-K option. We currently have a neighborhood 4-year-old school model. Under this centralized model, we would bring all preschool programming back to Edgewood. We would have some additions, remodeling to existing schools to accommodate additional enrollment. And this option would have a new elementary school opening in fall 2019. The neighborhood option is having additions of pre-K at our current elementary schools for 4-year-old pre-K. The upper level of Edgewood becomes integrated with Westwood. And again, a new elementary school open in 2019. The price difference of this one is more inclusive of construction of those pre-K classrooms at the neighborhood schools. That's the main part of the price difference here. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That has been taken, when we're talking here of remodeling and additions, the remodeling would encompass appropriate equipment for preschool students that are in that building. There would need to be some parking modifications at many of our sites because that is part of that equation. And so it's not specifically spelled out here, that has been taken into account. That's a great question. Thank you. So the pre-K right now, we have several different 4-year-old pre-K programs. Some are half day, some are full day, and some parents utilize the wraparound care through Kids Company, where they may drop kids off at Kids Company. They have a full day pre-K experience, and then they have, correct. Yep. That's correct. So the 4-year-old pre-K would have lunch, they'd have specials, so they would be part of that school experience. That is correct. We do have to offer pre-K programs. We also have to offer early childhood special education, which includes having an integrated approach with pre-K classrooms. So you can't have students that are special education segregated out, so you have to offer those programs. We're also largely a community-driven preschool program offering where we have parents that request, and those programs are developed based on community and student interest and family interest. Sorry, you had a question? So right now, Loyola Del-Lago, under this centralized option, would potentially be moving to Grainwood. Now, again, if this were the option the board were to approve, and we'd start to look at this in earnest and start to really wrap our heads around all the logistics associated with that, that would be part of our planning to say, is Grainwood the right place for it, and how would it fit in the whole puzzle, or it could go to another building. Right now, we're forecasting that it would go to Grainwood. At this point, we're anticipating Sage would most likely remain at Westwood, but as a school within a school program, that could go to any site in our elementary. Be their own school. So with this opening of a new elementary, we'd be redrawing attendance boundaries in the district. Yeah. Yeah, thanks. The original vision of La Ola del Lago was to start it out as a K program and build that into a K-5 program. And so we're looking at implementing third grade next year. The vision of that is to have a K-5 program in its own building. Yes. It would be integrated into the middle school. And so there would not be a Spanish immersion middle school. We would be looking right now at perhaps offering several of our classes at the middle school in Spanish. All right. Here's the neighborhood option piece again. Again, new elementary school 2019. It does require attendance boundaries to be redrawn. With neighborhood pre-K option, La Ola del Lago could stay at the Westwood campus as a possibility. Or it does offer us a little more option to look at perhaps going to another site or remaining at Westwood. Sage would have the same conversation there. Okay. The middle schools with additions, or current schools with additions, middle schools, we're looking at additions of classroom space, special ed specialists, and some phy ed stations there. Gymnastics would move to the high school, which would then open up that gym as a teaching space. We would be expanding the cafeterias, meeting and conference room, couple offices. Again, this option has that auditorium expansion, some co-curricular spaces, and looking at traffic flow. Again, I'm going to remind you, think about 10 years. That part about 10 years with the number of students. This is the option that would address 10 years worth of growth at the middle school level. At the high school, we'd be looking at more classroom additions in regular ed, special ed, specialists, and 5 phy ed teaching stations, expanding cafeteria, meeting and conference room space expansion, expand, redesign the auditorium, some restroom, health services, and co-curricular spaces. Again, looking at parking and new leased or built space for Bridges ALC. Now, this new option that I referenced is similar with classroom space, but what you see here is gymnastics would remain at Twin Oaks, so that reduces it by that one teaching station. We'd be looking at expansion of some core space needs and traffic flow at the middle schools. At the high school, again, the classroom piece stays consistent, but reducing by one gym. We would also be, again, not factoring in those spaces for robotics, the auditorium expansion and redesign, and some other co-curricular space. And so again, through feedback, this was an option that people wanted to take a look at. The difference is approximately $5.5 million reduction. Yes. 4.
We look at comparisons with other schools that are our size. Right now, we're light. One of the things that we were able to do, Prior Lake High School was built for 2,000 students. When we were able to, through lease levy, add additional classrooms, We were able to increase that capacity. We weren't, however, able to use any of those funds to increase the core space, like gyms, like cafeterias, like some of those things. So that's why even though we were able to add those classrooms, we're now in a position where we do have additional core space needs.
Ooh, you know, I think that brings me back before Jeff's time. I'm looking back there at Dr. Lund, and I think that's obviously even before his time. Dave, did you have something you wanted to reference? Then I'll go to Henry. So let me clarify that. And this brings me back when we're talking about gyms, our Phi Ed classes approach, 38 to 40 students in a class. If you're looking at providing a Phi Ed physical education curriculum course, you cannot have them on one court. You have to have two courts in order to present that curriculum to students in that high of a class, and they are high school students. Yes, sir. I believe Burnsville added 5 courts. But now, the 5 might be a stretch, but they did have their addition that was added on. We were there to look at it. Are you thinking 3? Okay, let's.
They didn't have the space. You know, if you think about where those 3 were added, I don't on their court though, or on their main court. I don't know if that's 2. Is it just 2 gyms? Okay, yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. So again, the data book has a lot of the information and comparables if you're looking at where some of the origins of this came from. Yes, right there and then over there. Now come back over here. Right. Right. No, and that's a good point. I mean, when we're looking at these and costing these out, these are general estimates. This has not been a mapped out building from the standpoint of design to really hone those costs in. So these are estimates. Mhm. Right. So as we look at the the students that are currently in our district, as well as the ones that are coming in, those have been factored in for this space. Correct. No, I don't believe that's in our data book. There should be, the classroom maps should be in there. All of the building schematics should be in the data book. I didn't know if they had the square footage listed on there though. Right. All right, one more back there. And Joe, and then Chris. Yeah. No, that has not been cut, but certainly that's not been what we're talking about here when we're talking about design. The last referendum did have technology and security, and as we look at that, that would be something that we haven't lost track of that, but we certainly would be factoring that in moving forward. So, actually, I'm going to take in these folks over here. Yes, sir. So the graduation class, the local requirement right now is 1 credit. You're welcome. Chris. So the referendum before was a 5 to 7 year look. This is a 10-year look. Yep. On enrollment, not open enrollment, on enrollment. Yes. It is a conservative look, but also too we look at the last 2 years, and again, I'm not a demographer, and demographers look at a lot of data, from housing starts to birth rates and all of those things to come up with their calculations. I can tell you the last 2 years for sure, when we're at 300 and plus students 2 years ago, and 440 students plus this year. I mean that is aggressive growth, and that is even more aggressive than it was back in the early 2000s when the district was really growing at the time. And so it is an average, and it is an average. And so when we're looking at the demographers report, and they're talking 250 resident students per year, that is an average.
So, Joe, to your question, I just wanted to be sure the audience knew that while I think what you were looking at is we're asking for or looking at more gym space than what would be required by MDE, we do that in every content area. So that's why we have so many electives, is because MDE doesn't require, they require X number of math and X number of science and X number of certain courses. But then students need X number of courses to graduate from high school. And they get a choice based on their passions, based on what they want to do, of which courses that would be. And then we try to fill them based on the needs. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, very good point. The average number of credits? Well, one is the requirement for Phi Ed, but I believe they need 7 elective credits to graduate. No? 16. Okay. Yeah.
No, there's 62,000 options in a high school schedule when you have 62,000 when you have a high school of 2,600 kids, and we offer all our classes by quarter. Students are in a typical 6-hour day. 4 of those hours are taken up by required classes. The simple way to look at it is in a 6-hour day, 4 hours for 9th, 10th, and 11th graders are taken up by required classes. The other 2 hours are elective classes. Remember, band and choir are elective classes. Spanish are elective classes, but many universities require 3 years of a foreign language. We offer Spanish, we offer German, and we offer French, and many ASL, now American Sign Language. Many colleges make you have 3 years of that to get in. So you can call it an elective, but if I needed to get into a university, it no longer becomes an elective. Our state FIAD requirements and health requirements actually is a semester of FIAD and a semester of health according to our local, which mirrors the state, which mirrors the national standards. But the easiest way to talk about the schedule, you can go into, we have FACS as an elective, family and consumer sciences, industrial technology, business. FIAD is one of those electives right along with it. So the students have to take some electives somewhere. Actually, FIAD is one of the cheaper electives you can offer. You have gym space, but once you have gym space, I can put 40 kids into a FIAD class. I can only put 28 into a FACS class. So when you start looking at the gym space, I get more bang for my buck actually with students in there and facilities and materials and supplies. I don't know if that answers the question. And seniors are required 1 credit. Now without prep, I can go look at my, I got Mr. Kabuchik back there. We actually did a study last spring as we were going through. FIAD is our most popular elective. We have more students taking FIAD elective classes than any other elective we offer. I'd have to go back and run the numbers, but remember, if they're not taking FIAD as an elective, again, and I'm not trying to con anybody into anything, they're taking something. So one way or the other, the schools find that all the time when they're going to save money and they cut an elective. Well, all those students have to go somewhere. I don't have the actual number of FIAD electives, but I do know when I ran the numbers, we have more students taking FIAD as an elective class than any other elective in our building. Yes, they are. With a caveat, in the fall we try to get outside when we can. I mean, the weather's nice, and in the spring we're going back outside. And since we turfed in the field, we can use that a lot more because band is out there in the fall. And so when you say that, if you come today when it was 60 degrees, I guarantee if they can get outside, they're going outside.
Thanks, Dave. All right, I'm going to keep going through this. These have been really good questions, and it's questions like these that really help us to understand and bring back better information and more clarification. So thank you very much. I mean, I appreciate what's coming forward and the questions that you're asking. Again, it goes to that engagement. So the second option, the third option, which is that, again, middle schools, it's 2 high school with middle school additions. The middle school looks the same. It's additions to the space. This one also has 2 high schools, the existing Prior Lake High School and 1 new high school to be opened the fall of 2020, core space for 1,500, designed to be expandable, open with classroom space of 1,500 students, and again, design and land to add up to 500 students if needed beyond 2027. The existing Prior Lake High School enrollment would come back from approximately 2,700 students to, eventually cap out at 1,800. Location of the new high school, again, there's nothing in the works. But if we're looking for new land for the amount of land that we would need for a high school, it's definitely looking, or maybe not definitely, but it would be projected to look in the southwest part of the district. We would have to consider secondary attendance boundaries, and we would have to look too at two co-curricular programs for more participation opportunities. We could have separate teams, or we could have shared district teams depending on student interest. Correct. Yeah, good question. So, that's right. Question was, secondary, very much like elementary, parts of the community would divide to go to each of those high schools. Yes. We anticipate that the middle schools will remain a campus with students accessing programs in both buildings. Yeah. That would be the intent. Right now, with how we have traffic flow coming through Hidden Oaks and Twin Oaks, we would be rerouting that. Certainly around drop-off and pickup time, that is a bit congested. But also, too, during the day when it's not drop-off and pickup time, we do have people out there stopping traffic and kids going back and forth between the buildings. So here's our option summary again. The two elementary, and I am going to get to that scaled approach with elementary. The secondary addition, or secondary options, and again, we need an elementary option and a secondary option to accommodate growth. So one of the feedback components that came was, you know, what if you postponed a new elementary building and just went with additions to address at least for 5 years? And as we looked at 5 years of elementary enrollment growth, we would need 24 classrooms. 24 classrooms is approximately the size of a brand new school. But we still went further and said, well, if we're going to look at 24 classrooms, how would that look on our current sites? One of the things that we know is we do have room collectively with our sites for 24 classrooms, but not all elementary classrooms can accommodate an equal expansion. The other component, and it was brought up earlier, adding the number of classrooms with additions would lead to added core space, kitchen space, gym space, and parking at several, if not all of those sites. Because right now, the number of students that we have at our elementaries, 500 to 600, adding these amount of classroom spaces would put those buildings up over probably 700, if not more. And so once you do that, school sites are exceeding 6 sections, and there is an operating cost associated to that once those elementary schools become larger. And so this was not deemed as viable. However, I'll get through this and I'll come to your question, okay? I thought you were going to have, okay. We did look at a phased approach with the elementary. One is a 10-year facility plan, 1 referendum approach, or a 10-year facility plan, 2 referenda approach for elementary. So if we were looking at centralized pre-K in option 1, we'd look at a new 4-section elementary, some additions at a couple of our buildings for this cost. Oh, boo. Sorry. And then we looked at what would the second 5 years look like. And you can see what the total cost for both of those phases would look like collectively. But it does, spread that out a bit. Some of these they might be, again, some could move over, but for the most part, the identified bullet points on this side for Greenwood refurbishment, Westwood, Edgewood, some remodeling in our buildings are needed in our current facilities right now. So that's why they're on that first 5 years phase. If we were to look at the same concept with our neighborhood pre-K, new 4-section elementary, pre-K additions at our sites, Greenwood, Westwood, Edgewood. And then the second part would be additions, again, for that second 5 years. So it separates it out a little bit, and it phases it in with a bulk of the projects, particularly that new elementary school, happening on the front end. And that's why you see the large cost difference between the first 5 years and the second 5 years. That is yes, that is the, I'm not into speculation. Yes, sir. You know, it's a good question. Several of our sites, and again, we'd have to look at that more specifically if we were to redraw the attendance boundaries. Some of our sites do need attention in their core spaces. The things at Greenwood are necessary, and a lot of that's infrastructure. You know, it's currently, you know, the big ticket item there is it needs a boiler replacement that was originally used as a coal burner. That's been retrofitted several different times. So there are some things that are still needed. Looking at a large elementary school, that's a possibility. There are districts out there that have done a very large elementary school and then routed all their kids to that large elementary school. What that means is you start to lose, it does cost more to operate. And so when you're looking at staff and support staff, those costs start to increase as well. How many students or classrooms? Well, not all of our schools are built equally, you know, because they're built at different times. Right. So most of our schools right now are 4- and 5-section schools. So they're anywhere between that 24 classrooms up to 30, 32 classrooms right now. That's regular education classrooms, not including special education, not including gyms, art, music, things like that, which you do need to add those on there as well. There's that too. Welcome. If you're within a year, welcome. Yeah. Yeah. It's very similar to that first option that was removed. Because that option that led to that comprehensive campus with a high school and middle school, one of the middle schools would have been renovated to a really large elementary. You know, I'm not sure. I'm not, I mean, I think there certainly is a remodel cost and there certainly is a new construction cost. I mean, that could be something we could clarify, you know, that as we move forward. So. Let's see. I'm sorry, I'm moving through the secondary kind of, I don't mean to, but we also looked at a phase 1 for the 1 high school option with some additions here on the front end, as well as to the second side of the 5 years at our middle schools with our 1 high school option. At our 2 high school option, we also have that phased in approach. First 5 years, second 5 years. And so then we also did the cost comparison between, again, largely looking, I guess the blue here, 10-year, this phased in approach. And you can see there's some comparable costs here, but there's some slight increases with delaying too as well. So there, it just gives a perspective of what that could look like. Yes? That's okay. Oh. We have, yeah, we have not, with where we're at in the process, we have not determined the price per household based on any referenda. We've not done that calculation, and we haven't brought that forward. Yeah. Yeah. They are. Yeah. Certainly. Yeah. That's, we have had that feedback before. And so that is something we are going to work on, so that we can put some projections out there for, it does become real when you're talking about what the tax impact is. And so we can work on that. The same time. Yep. Right. There's an operating cost side to this. Correct. Yep. There was one back there. Yes. So right now, we've not, as far as what the boundaries would look like for 2 high schools, we haven't done any of that analytics. I mean, we don't have a site selected for a second high school, so it's very difficult to determine what boundaries would look like from that side. And then from the middle school standpoint, right now, parents select the middle school that they want their kids to as their home school. And appropriately, they are then assigned to that school. And again, while they have maybe a majority of their classes at those schools, they do access both sites throughout the day. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed your question. I have not. We have not done that process either for determining how we would transition kids from both middle schools into the separate high schools. Again, that would come in with that attendance boundary piece. Hmm. We know we've surpassed that now with the number of students that we have at the high school, and that is part of our estimates and calculations for these options moving forward. Can you tell me, give me an example? What do you, when you're saying optimum? Yeah. Sure. I don't know if I've seen anything that would be described as an optimum. And I see Dave back there shaking his head either.
And I don't either. I'd love to see that if you can find any, because when I think about our current largest high schools in the state are also some of the most high performing. Wayzata is our largest school, high school in the state, and I don't have the data in front of me, but I think it's one of the highest performing districts. Minnetonka, Edina, are all within that top 10 high schools in terms of size and also strong academics. Now, where we hear and heard input from the community is in terms of optimum opportunities for kids, that lessens. Because if you only have, you know, one robotics team or one band and choir or one, yeah, exactly. So I think people would, I think it's really interesting because I think if you had different people, depending on what their experiences were, they might define optimal differently, you know, because so-and-so went to a smaller school, that was optimal, but somebody over here might say something different. So it's a great question.
So our next steps, and we're going to get to the point where we actually get you into groups. These questions have been great. I will stay and ask if you have questions for me. I'd be happy to answer them. But we do have several different input sessions. We've got the input tonight, and the team's coming back together again to look at the information. Christy already mentioned the school board study session on April 24th to review the options coming forward, with the intention of taking board action on the option moving ahead at the May 8th meeting. So with that, I think, Christy, this is back to your slide. And then can you give people the...
Advance the next slide. I think we're going to change gears just slightly because we've got a nice big group. I'm going to skip conference room A. Don't go there. We're going to have 2 small groups here. So what we're going to do is break out into small groups, 10 to 15 per group, so that everybody gets a chance to state their input and their feedback in a small group setting, and we're going to go through the options. So this is the boardroom. We're going to have 1 small group here and 1 small group back there. Dr. Edwards, I think you were group A, so raise your hand. That's Dr. Edwards. Then conference room D is this room right here. Go out and to your right. The break room is all the way at the end of the hallway to the right. And then the professional development center is midway down the hall on your right. So you'll have facilitators in each group, and all of your comments will be recorded. Okay? We'll take about an hour.